because it stands at the level of one's weakness. Of course, we know victory comes from the Lord. Failure comes from the evil one. In other words, if you fail once, don't fret. Just stand up right away, pray to God for forgiveness and renewed strength, and move on. Don't wallow in your river of tears. Think of the times that you were victoriously able to turn away from temptation. For instance, at the height of my homosexual enslavement, I had sex more than 10 times a day. I struggled. I struggled hard. The more than 10 times became 9 times a day. I did not focus on the 9 times that I failed. I focused on the 1, 2, 3 times that I was able to succeed. That was already victory. The struggle continued. It became more than once a month, then more than once every 6 months, and so on, until the monster was finally vanquished and the victory of the Lord was won. Again, I say, it's quite difficult to really explain it well, no? But perhaps a sharing from my wife would be very insightful. So I introduce to you, I introduce her in our pro-life radio show, Digma ng Buhay, as ang pinakamagandang babae sa balat ng lupa. The most beautiful woman in the world, my wife, Joyce.
Thank you, Sir. Good evening, brothers and sisters in Christ. You have seen and heard my husband, Ansel, but do you remember Ansel Beluso in the 1980s or 1990s? It now seems like an entire lifetime ago that he became quite popular. People of generation ago may today remember him as the co-host of Astor Amoyo, TV show Showbiz Gossip, Isang Tanong, Isang Sagot. I don't know if you know it. Or as Inday Badiday's writer segment, producer in GMA7's primetime TV show, Eye to Eye. Or as one of the most fearless field reporters of Loca Production, Movie Magazine, hosted by Nap Gutierrez and Christy Fermin. That was in the 1990s. Ansel, quite notorious in his time, he used the power of his pen to destroy the reputation of some very famous people. He was sued for libel by no less than superstar Nora Honor, for the reason that he himself now prefers to forget. Movie scribe Lolit Solis had him arrested and sent to jail twice when he failed to attend hearings for a libel suit she filed against him. Music legend Kule Desma and her fans became very angry at him for imposing some private things in her family closet. Exposing some private things in her family closet. Megastar Sharon Cuneta did not talk to him for more than 2 years after a TV interview which she pointedly asked about her marital breakup. And Cory Aquino, who was the president at that time, scolded him during a TV interview for repeatedly asking about the controversial romance of her daughter Chris Aquino and bad boy of the Philippine movies Robin Padilla. Matinee idol Richard Gomez wanted to punch his face when he wrote a malicious gossip item about him in a broadsheet column. And the list goes on. But Ansel has since turned a new leaf and found a new life. I am his wife, the mother of 3 children, with whom will mark 17 years of marital bliss in June this year. I would like to say that I am the second beneficiary of Ansel's conversion, and he's the first, of course. Today, I am here to share my joy and gratitude to God for providing the strength to Ansel, especially in his difficult journey away from the lifestyle that he once embraced but has since forsaken. Sorry. But let me tell you about myself. I am the youngest and the only girl in a brood of 5. Can you imagine, Ansel, I have 4 brothers. And I come from a family that can be classified as dysfunctional because early on, the breadwinner was an OFW. I was 6 years old when my father, a seaman, started leaving us to unknown destination all over the world. He'd be always, he'd be away for 2 years, come home for a month or two, and be off again for 2 years. So I practically grew up without a father, only with an overprotective mother. I was the caterpillar who became a butterfly too late in life because my nanay kept me too long in the cocoon with her suffocating affections. Perhaps because of this, I longed and sought love and romance with older men. And the series of boyfriends I had before I met Ansel began before I reached 16 years old. At first, I first saw Ansel Beluso in February 2000 at an international conference of Singles for Christ in Corregidor, where he was a sharer. He gave an impassioned, powerful speech of how he decided to forsake the homosexual identity and gay lifestyle that once defined him. At the end of his sharing, he declared, "Before I couldn't live without a man. Today, I open myself to the possibility of loving a woman, getting married, and building a family." I was among the more than 5,000 young men and women who heard Ansel and got totally swept away by his outstanding testimony. Of course, little did I know that I'd later be the woman he'd take as his wife, with whom he'd built a family. But that is getting ahead of the story. Ansel and I both worked together. He was a full-time missionary. I was an executive assistant in Co-ops for Christ. But we did not meet there first. I was too busy trying to get noticed by some of the cute full-time workers to even bother seeking him out. We were first introduced in what we called Christian Life Program, where he was the sharer and I was the service team. The next time we met at another event, we agreed to go home together because we both come from Angono, Rizal. I thought he had a car and I get a ride with him. He thought I had a car and he'd get a ride with me. It turned out we both took a ride with another couple who also lived in Angono. On the way home, Ansel was being persuaded to visit Libya because the couple was a country coordinator of Libya then, and it's an international mission area where he could possibly find a girlfriend and potential wife. Ansel was excited about the prospect. I then mentioned that I was also looking for a boyfriend. And the brother Tito laughed and said while he was driving, "Oh, we might not need to go to Libya after all. Perhaps God is already working your lives right now as we speak." These words have proven prophetic, but at the time, both Ansel and I could only laugh nervously. When Ansel began courting me, as Ansel mentioned earlier, I cried. In my prayers, I told God, "Lord, you know how much I've struggled to lead a life that is right with you. Why are you punishing me this way? I have a Laughing Christ poster in my bedroom, and I thought, Lord, don't laugh at me. It's not a joke." I didn't like him, not only because of his homosexual past, but because he was practically penniless. At that time, I wished for someone stable enough to already own a house and perhaps a car to boot. And I prayed for a husband who could take care of me financially so that in marriage I would not have to work to augment the family coffers. My dream was to be a stay-at-home mom because I grew up, my mom is a workaholic and she worked 45 years in her life, and that's at the age of 65, that's just the time that she stopped. And And during that time, before my four brothers turned age 40, they already have their own house, they already have their cars. So during that time, Ansel is turning 40 and he has nothing. But Ansel was not rich. He just looked rich because of his mestizo features. And the first thing he told me about himself was how deeply he was in debt. I was utterly dumbstruck when he showed me his list of creditors and how much he owed them. But at least he is honest. As for the gay lifestyle he once led, I now honor him for the honesty with which he told me about all of his homosexual exploits. But at the time, I could only cringe in bizarre fascination at his incredible stories. My nanay also furiously disapproved of Ansel for a different reason. Ansel has an adopted son. He was when I met Ansel, he was only 9 years old. And my nanay believes that the boy was his own biological progeny. She feared that he must have had a wife and the woman might create trouble for me later in life. Because during that time, we called Ansel in the home Couples for Christ home office, we called him Direct. So we called him Direct Ansel because he directs and writes our TV ministry in his steps. So my nanay believed that all the directors are playboys. I got so fed up with my nanay's protest about Ansel's child that I just snapped one day and blurted out, "Nay, it's impossible for the boy to be Ansel's son because Ansel is a gay." My nanay was speechless but only for several seconds. Then she rattled off again with these new ammunitions against Ansel. Ansel's cluelessness in the game of courtship was first very irritating, but soon I found it strangely endearing. He was so persistent and single-minded in his pursuit of me that the 3 times I rejected him did not deter him at all. He is very prayerful, profoundly spiritual man, and in his heart, he professed with a clarity that defied human logic that God was giving me to him to be his wife. So on September 8, year 2000, on Mama Mary's birthday, barely 5 months after he first courted me, and after we have prayed together in the prayer room of the Couples for Christ home office, I accepted Ansel as the man with whom I was to spend the rest of my life. 3 months after he formally asked my parents for my hand in marriage, and on June 14 the following year, when Ansel was turning 40 and I was turning 30, we marched down the aisles to exchange the marital vows. Ang bilis niya, no? We did not reach our first anniversary. But my former boyfriends, I had 4 boyfriends before Ansel. The shortest relationship was 1 year, and the longest is 4 years. Pero sa Ansel, ilang months. Okay. The wedding was a miracle of sorts, especially in the light of the fact that 2 months prior, Ansel and I didn't even have the 2,000 pesos needed as down payment for the invitations, much less for the many of other things necessary for altar date. But we had the grandest wedding ever in the Christ the King Green Meadows. I felt like the gates of heaven just opened and blessings upon blessings kept pouring down upon us. When Tito Frank prayed over, I cannot forget what he said, "This is a wedding made in heaven." And after the wedding, after paying off everything, we made an inventory of all the gifts and discovered that exclusive of the wedding gifts in kind, we still had a big surplus of solid financial blessings, the first money we ever had as a couple.
And we had our honeymoon in Paris and in London. Somebody gave us a mileage, a ticket. It has been 16 years today, aside from Noel, Ansel's adopted son. We have been blessed with 2 more kids, Gian Christopher and John Paul Benedict. John Paul Benedict was made in Rome. Okay, it's Pope John Paul and Pope Benedict. People get curious. They ask, is Ansel still gay? I really don't know how to answer that question. I sometimes still catch him with gay affections and affectations, and when on panic mode, his voice becomes a little shrill. But our sex life is satisfying, and I am proud to say that he is 100% faithful to me. When he finds himself attracted to a guy in a bus, he simply gets off. When the temptations to get gets too strong, he calls me and we talk about it and pray until the moment passes. It has been more than 10 years now since that last happened. I'm very happy to note that my husband possesses virtues and values I never found in my past suitors and ex-boyfriends. He is patient and kind, giving and forgiving, humble and self-effacing. Quite significantly, too, he is very into his wife. He goes out of his way to study the nature of a woman so he can understand me well. And he always blows me away by his willingness to learn new ways to love me. He is not only generous with gifts, but also with himself. He is in a constant process of change and reinvention as he discovers better and more innovative ways to express his love for me. Ansel's struggle with same-sex attraction, in Ansel's struggles with same-sex attraction, he once revealed to me the top 3 things that helped him tremendously. First was prayer. Aside from our daily couple prayer in the morning and family prayer with our children at bedtime, Ansel devotes time to reading and reflecting on scripture, especially the gospel for the day. He also faithfully does his daily devotions, the rosary and the chaplet of divine mercy. And he makes time to read up on the lives of saints, the writings of holy men, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. Sometimes I wake up in the wee hours of the morning and find him still up, reading papal encyclicals and other Vatican documents. Also in Ansel's armory to fight against his demons is service to God. That's the reason why he, as a personal rule, never turns down requests to give talks on authentic Christian living, marriage enrichment, parenting, chastity education, etc. He also studies to make his own talk outlines. This, he says, helps him in the process of digesting more fully some major aspects of being a Christian, like overcoming struggles in the Christian life, responding with love instead of human weakness to difficult people and circumstances, strengthening the resolve to live out authentic repentance and renewal, understanding the will and the way of God, etc. Ansel has a very practical way of explaining how given talks helps him in his journey. He said, in Tagalog, paano pa ako manlalaki sa dami ng nasabihan ko ng salita ng Diyos at nasharean ko tungkol sa love ni God sa akin. Mahiya naman ako sa mga taong to, and kung makaya kong hindi mahiya sa mga taong to, mahiya naman ako sa Diyos. At he always said, alam ko, hindi ko makakayang mahiya sa Diyos. For many years now, Ansel has been brought to other parts of the world, giving talks to different audiences. Last year, I joined him in a mission trip to Europe for a series of speaker engagement as part of his recent appointment as the Special Assistant of the Servant General for CFCFFL Europe. Ansel is also very happy hosting the pro-life radio program of CFCFFL on Radio Veritas 846. This is now the 8-year-old Digma ng Buhay every Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. and he has a live stream. He explains, in a secular society where it is politically correct to follow the world instead of the Lord, I don't mind lending my tiny voice to speak out in defense of God. Another service Ansel does for God is to give some personal life coaching sessions for people with same-sex attraction and their loved ones. He shares with them what has worked for him in the hope that it will work for them too. He also prays for them so they may find their own path to God. It is by no means easy, but there is certainly a way to step out of the gay lifestyle. And Ansel never tries of saying to anyone who cares to listen. Sadly, not everyone does. The third thing that Ansel says he always remember to help him sustain his strength against temptation is the joy he has found in our family. He told me once, happiness and joy are two totally different things. In the gay lifestyle, I was happy, but it is nothing compared to the joy I have discovered in this new life that God has opened for me with you and our kids. I will never ever do anything to damage this joy because it comes from the Lord. As I stand before you today, I reflect on the past 16 years I have shared with Ansel. There have been a lot of challenges, difficulties, and even tears, but no regrets. And there has always been the constancy of joy I myself have found in my own decision to follow God in my life with Ansel and our children. I look forward to the next 16 years and beyond. Ansel and I still don't have a car. We still live in a rented house. Our savings always go zero balance by the end of each month. By no means are we rich in the scales of the world. But ours is a life of fullness and contentment. Truly, I ask nothing more. Thank you, and to God be the glory.